However, the two-track, because we have a lot of families that come and say, I want my child to go to the classical route because it sounds nice. Both of the tracks give the students access to university. When they get to university, they're able to study whatever they want. Parents, don't stress if your child is not able to get into classical. The general track is totally fine.
Such information, although a lot is available on the public domain, but just having a visual and an audio mode of, let's say, a short summary can help a lot of Instagram-friendly parents to find this information and consume it.
What's really interesting about the Luxembourgish school system is that there are just so many options, because even with what I just explained, there are
exactly, because I was already drawing like a flowchart kind of thing with tree and a subtree and a branch going
yeah.
And there used to be times wherein, like with the commune teachers, if you were asking something that, okay, how was his day, what did he do, so on and so forth. So at times a few of the teachers were a little bit struggling because the common mode of language for us to interact was English. So if we are finding short of vocabulary, the 3-year kid at that point in time was able to do the role of a translator. And I was simply amazed that how can a child do that? So namaste and hello everyone. Welcome to the Expat Parenting Show. Today we have a very special guest and I'm really excited to talk to this person because this person is from the Ministry of Education of Luxembourg. Let's say our first official guest here who is coming from an administrative body, and I'm really excited to welcome him to our show. So welcome Dwayne to our show.
Thank you for having me. Yes. So my name is Dwayne Godding. I am an American expat, actually. I currently work for the Ministry of Education of Luxembourg in a department named SIA. In French, it's the Service de l'Intégration et de l'Accueil Scolaire. So it's the department for the integration and the welcoming of students, for example. And our department is basically responsible for the scholarization or enrollment of newly arrived students here in Luxembourg. So newly arrived students means people who just arrived to Luxembourg, or students who might not have been registered in the Luxembourgish system and who want to be registered in the Luxembourgish system. So maybe they were in a private school, for example, here in Luxembourg. And so we're responsible for that.
Awesome. So I might have interacted with the department when I initially moved to Luxembourg, but it's been
probably
it's been quite some time. So yeah, for sure. By now, I think I consider myself like, okay, I'm settled here for quite some time. So I have lost track of my memory over here.
How long have you been in Luxembourg?
It's going to be 8 years for me in September.
Okay, so it wasn't with me. I've been here for 5 years. I was gonna say maybe you spoke to me on the phone when you came, but no, it's been 5 years for me.
Wow. Yeah. So I did not know that you are from the US. So yeah, that's a pleasant surprise to know.
From Boston.
Okay. I've never been to the US. Although I have a lot of relatives and friends there, but maybe next year or next to next year, I plan to go there just to visit them.
Perfect. You have to go to Boston.
Definitely. It's on my list. Okay, so I'm once again welcome to the show, Dwayne. So happy to have you. And if you are ready, I have a list of questions for you that I'd like to ask you so that our audience can actually benefit and know more about what you do actually at SIA and how the particular department of yours is helping expat parents with integrating their children into the education system here.
Perfect. I'm ready.
Ready. Okay. So with that, like as I mentioned briefly right now, I'd like you to share that. Can you, on a very high level, provide an overview of the Luxembourgish education system and its key features?
Absolutely. So for everyone out there who's listening, the Luxembourgish system is very, very complex. And one of the reasons why is because we have so many languages, which is not something that is typical In other countries, for example, so like for example in the US we have English and that's it.
Mhm.
um, and here in Luxembourg we have Luxembourgish, we have French, and we have German, and then English is also incorporated starting from the secondary level. So because we have all of these languages, it's a really complex system. And even sometimes for us in the ministry, we get headaches because there are so many changes. So I can imagine for newly arrived families how this could be, confusing at times, especially if you have no one to talk to. Um, so yeah, I'll give again a brief explanation of the school system because we could talk for hours about it. But yeah, so the Luxembourgish school system, we have 13 years in total
Uh-huh.
of what we consider official schooling.
Yeah.
So primary school is divided up in cycles, actually. We don't have grades.
Yes.
We have four cycles, 1 through 4, and each cycle is comprised of 2 years. So that makes a total of 8 years. However, cycle one is the equivalent of like I would say kindergarten. So we
Mm-hmm.
don't consider it really like official schooling, but
Yeah.
it is a part of the school system, of course.
Yeah.
Um, in cycle 1.0, this is for students who are age 3. So this is a kind of a preschool class. It's an option for families. Children can be registered via the city hall or the commune. And because it's not mandatory, it depends. It's a first come first serve
Mm-hmm.
uh, type of thing. So if you have a child that's 3 years old, starting on the 1st of September,
Yeah.
then you can ask your city hall to register the child in cycle 1.0.
Mm-hmm.
In cycle 1.1 and
Yeah.
1.2, so the equivalent again of kindergarten,
Yes.
this is where children start learning Luxembourgish for the first time.
Yeah.
So they do this through games, through music, reading.
Yeah.
They also get exposed a little bit to French and German, but they don't learn the languages. It's really just to begin to distinguish, between the three.
Mm-hmm.
But Luxembourgish is the main language of instruction for ages 4 and 5. Starting in cycle two,
Mm-hmm.
so this is when the child is 6 years old.
Yes.
The children start learning German for the first time, written and yeah, reading, of course.
Yeah.
So for example, they learn the alphabet in German for the
Yeah.
first time. And yes, cycle 2.1, I would say, is the equivalent of maybe grade one in other
Yes.
countries, just
Yeah.
so that families can understand. So yeah, this is essentially official schooling for us. And so the kids start having homework, for example, different assignments and projects and things like that in school. Um, Starting at age 7, they so cycle 2.2, the children do start learning French orally.
Mm-hmm.
And then at age 8 in cycle 3.1, they start learning written French, for example, and reading.
Okay. So in grade two, we also introduce another language, which is
Yes,
French.
French.
So,
Yes.
and having said that, so Luxembourgish is constant.
Yeah.
Like the children are learning Luxembourgish. German is the mode of teaching,
Yeah.
and French is introduced as a third language. Like maybe in other schools, people introduce other regional languages, maybe. So here we introduce French.
Correct.
And this you're
It,
talking about the commune schools currently.
correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Correct. This is just Luxembourgish communal schools.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So essentially, they continue their education until the age of about 11, 12. So
Mm-hmm.
in cycle 4.2, the last year of primary, um, there are a set of exams that the children have to take.
Yeah.
And we mainly look at German, French, and math to determine where they can go at the secondary level.
Mm-hmm.
Before I get to the secondary level, another thing that I didn't mention here in Luxembourg, school obligation is between the ages of 4 and currently 16, but there's a new law that was passed that will extend it till the age of 18.
Okay.
Um, so that means all children between those ages have to go to school by law. Um, Yes, so back to primary school. Yeah, so depending on the grades, their results in cycle 4.2, so again, the end of primary schooling, they will be oriented to one of three tracks, let's say, for the secondary level.
Okay.
Do you want me to continue
Yeah,
with
what
second?
would be, that would be because let's say even for somebody like me, my kid is still in primary. He is in cycle 2.1. So for
Okay.
me also, this would be a good awareness, like if I have to ask from the personal point of view that, okay, what happens after secondary? Because I still know I'm aware of little bit till primary.
Hmm.
Although my kid goes to, let's say, the state funded international school, if I can say that.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So he attends that school, but with secondary, I still have a few questions that, okay, what happens in secondary? So
Mhm.
this I did not know that in 4.2 we have an exam and the kids have to, based on their grades, they then evaluate the next course of their education.
Right, but careful. So if your son is in the international system, it's a bit different.
Different. Yes.
But yeah, so in the Luxembourgish system, yeah, after 4.2, they have the exams. The results will determine where they can go for secondary. The first track would be the classical route, and this route is actually, I would say, mainly for students who have completed all of their primary school. In order to get into that track, you have to
Mhm.
have perfect German, perfect French. You have to speak good Luxembourgish, of course, too, and then have the highest scores in math. And because of the languages, it's really difficult for people who haven't lived in Luxembourg to enter that system. So you can have a student who's brilliant, a brilliant student, let's say in math, has great grades, but maybe doesn't have French and German, and so it's kind of difficult to enter the
Yeah,
classical route if you don't have those languages.
yeah.
We do obviously have exceptions. I would say people moving from, let's say, Belgium or Switzerland, where they have French and German, depending on where
Yes.
you live, this could be a possibility.
Mhm.
And then even in the classical route, there are options for students who have, let's say, amazing French, amazing math scores, but maybe don't have German,
Mhm.
or maybe have a low level of German.
Yeah.
And in that case, there are specific classes that are available for them as well, where they can
Yeah.
integrate, this classical route.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so the classical route, it's 7 years of schooling. The children, they do 4 years of kind of like a middle school. We don't have middle
Mhm.
school here, but it's
Yes.
kind of like a
Yes.
middle school.
Yeah.
And after that fourth year, they choose a specialization.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last 3 years, they mainly focus on that specialization. Once they complete high school, they receive, of course, a high school diploma, and that gives them access to university.
Yeah.
Okay, then we have the general track.
Mm-hmm.
So the general track is pretty broad. We kind of split it into two. The first part, yeah, so these are for students who in primary had good French, good German, good math scores. Maybe not the best,
Mm-hmm.
um, not the highest grades, but they're proficient. And so, yeah, in this track, instead of having 4 years of middle school,
Yeah.
they have three.
Okay.
So it's 1 year shorter. They have 3 years, and then they have to choose a specialization, and then they do 4 years of that specialization
Okay. So
for
here
receiving.
it's 3 plus 4. In the classic one, it was 4 plus 3.
Exactly. Still a total of 7 years. But yeah, there's that slight
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah.
And then for the classical route, I would say the specializations tend to be a bit more broad,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of gives the student, let's say, a vast knowledge in the subject. So instead of, I'm just giving an example. This is not
Yeah.
exactly what it is, but let's say the child decides to do science. They're going to learn, a bunch of different sciences.
Yeah.
Whereas in the general track, they'll pick a specific science and they'll focus
Mhm.
just on that.
Okay.
So like chemistry, for
Yeah. Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
However, the two tracks, because we have a lot of families that come and say, I want my child to go to the classical route because it sounds nice. Um, the both of the tracks give the students access to university,
Mm-hmm.
and when they get to university, they're able to study whatever they want. So they're not limited in any way.
Yeah.
and they're both great tracks. So parents, don't stress if your if your child is not able to get into classical. The general track is totally fine.
Yeah.
Um, and then the last route that we have, it's also a part of the general track. It's for the students who basically didn't have the best scores. Maybe they had, I don't know, good math scores, but
Mhm.
they were lacking in French or in German or vice versa.
Mhm.
And so this route actually, it's a preparatory route. That's the word I was looking
Okay.
for. The preparatory track. And this track kind of, they work a little bit differently. They have modules. They don't have grades. They have modules.
Okay.
And the students need to get a certain amount of these modules in order to be able to transfer back into the regular general track, which
Mhm.
gives access to university. So they also have 3 years of this middle school period, so that gives them 3 years time to, get enough modules to switch. If
Mhm.
they don't have enough modules, then what happens is they get oriented to like a vocational training
Yeah.
program.
Okay.
And we have three types. The first one is a professional certificate. It's called CCP.
Mhm.
And the student usually does 4 days out of the week working,
Mhm.
kind of like an internship, let's say, and then 1 day in class. So 4 days internship, 1 day class.
Yeah.
And in class, they're not studying everything. They're just studying what pertains to their work that they're doing.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, that's the first one. It's a 3 year program. After that, they receive a certificate, and usually, they go to work after.
Mm.
Um, the second one is a level, it's a bit higher. It's a DAP, so it's a professional diploma. It's
Okay.
also 3 years. Instead of 4 days working, they have 3 days working and then 2 days in school.
Mm. Okay.
Okay, and then the last one is the technician's diploma. This one, there's no work at all. It's a 4 year program, so it's equivalent to the classical and the general track.
Okay.
5 days a week in school. And what's interesting here is that the students they do 4 years. After they complete the 4 years, they get a diploma. If they do one more year of schooling, so a fifth year, and they complete that year, that gives them access to the university.
Okay.
However, the difference is at the university, they're only going to be able to study what they studied in high school. So, for example, if you study IT, then when you get to university, you cannot decide to become a doctor. You can
Yeah.
only study
Yeah.
IT or math or something related to what you studied in high school.
Okay. But
So
in
that's,
in the general and the classical one, there is an option that the children may switch the different fields when they go to university.
yes, absolutely,
Okay.
yes. So classical in general gives them, free access at the university. They can study whatever they want. They
Yeah.
do have a specialization. So yeah, but I mean,
Yeah.
when you're young, your ideas change, of course. So, but yes,
Absolutely.
and these two tracks, they can choose whatever they want at the university level. The technician's diploma, however, they cannot. They have to study what they studied in high school. Um, and just to kind of wrap up, what's really interesting about the Luxembourgish school system is that there are just so many options. Because even with what I just explained, there are a
Exactly, because
bunch of different
I was
classes.
already drawing like a flowchart kind of thing with, a tree and a subtree and a branch going
Yeah,
here.
yeah, 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 yeah. There's even more. So
Yes,
that's just the general structure. But what's really cool about it is that there are so many options because
yes,
we have so many different students with so many different backgrounds, and we try not to put them in this mold. And they always have the option to, go up or go down. You can be in classical, you might not be a good enough student, and then you get put into general or maybe even into the
mm,
vocational training. If you are in vocational training, you also have the option to work to get to the
general.
university. I had a colleague, for example, who was oriented to this preparatory track. He did the 3 years. He did a DAP, so the second of the three
Yeah, yeah,
professional trainings. He did the 3 years. After the 3 years, he skipped to the DT, so the technician's diploma. He did 3 years there plus the extra year,
extra
and
year.
then he went to university and got his bachelor's. So there's a, you can still
Yeah,
move. You're not stuck. It takes longer,
yes.
unfortunately, but there's always a possibility to to go up or to go go down.
Good to know, and thank you for providing such a comprehensive, let's say, overview. Because a lot of these things, even I did not know, like the possibility, the very fact that there is flexibility to move up and down, as you said, like we can switch between the different modes of, let's say, general to classical, or a person who's or a student who's studying under the vocational one. There is a possibility that in future they can go to the university and pursue
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
higher education. That's great. So moving forward, because I mean that I'm sure might have helped a lot of parents who are sending their kids to the local commune schools,
Hmm.
or who are planning to send their kids to the local commune school. Now my next question to you, Dwayne, is more in terms of, because as you said in the initial introduction, that we have so many different schools, and the education systems here in Luxembourg are quite a lot. We have so many options. So how does the public schooling system in Luxembourg cater to the Luxembourgish as well as the international students?
Hmm. Yes. So I think this is one of the coolest things about Luxembourg in terms of the educational system. Excuse me. We offer free public international schools, and
Yeah,
this is not something you see in other countries. So, for example, in the U.S., I don't know if I want my child to learn French, for example, it's probably going to be private. I don't know, wherever you are in the world, most countries don't have that. I don't want to say there are none because I don't know, but
yeah,
it's very rare in any case. And here in Luxembourg, we have this option for students. And I think that's mainly because of our population, the demographics of the country. Nearly half of the country comes from outside of Luxembourg. And even within the
yes,
50% that are Luxembourgish, there's a lot, like myself, I'll be Luxembourgish in a couple of days, actually.
yeah,
So I'm going to be included in that number, but I'm actually American,
yes,
or originally. Because of the diversity of the country, the Ministry of Education had to well, didn't have to, but decided to provide access to these international schools. And they're free again. So I thought that was really cool. The Luxembourgish system, just to kind of rephrase what you said, I wouldn't say the Luxembourgish system is specifically for Luxembourgish students. It's open to everyone.
everyone.
Even in the Luxembourgish system, there are methods and different classes that are available to students who just arrived to the country, depending no matter what their age level is.
Yeah,
There are options for them in the Luxembourgish system, where we can integrate them into the Luxembourgish system.
yeah, yeah.
So, for example, at the secondary level, we have what we call classe d'accueil. So it's like a welcoming class. And so this class actually is, again, a class that's dedicated to students who just arrived to the country who have no knowledge of French or German. Typically, we give French classes, but German is also an option.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so the program is it's 30 hours of schooling per week, just like all the other students here in Luxembourg.
Yeah,
The main difference is those students are going to have 15 out of those 30 hours dedicated to learning
yeah,
French.
yeah,
The other 15 hours are in other subjects, so they'll have math, they'll have art, they have gym, they have a little bit of Luxembourgish, English, etc. So it's a full package. But the goal is to get the child to learn French as quickly as possible. It's usually a year long.
mm-hmm.
And after that year, normally the child would then be able to integrate a regular class, for lack of a better word, where French is, of course, the main language of instruction. So yeah, even in the Luxembourg system, there are ways for us to integrate students who just arrived to the country who are not necessarily Luxembourgish.
Yes,
Um, but and then for the international schools, um, yeah, I mean, everyone, it works in both ways. So there's Luxembourgish students who can also go to the international schools.
yes,
There are some Luxembourgish students, for example, who have difficulties, let's say, with French.
mm-hmm.
And so maybe they will decide to go to a school where they might not have to use French as much. So yeah, and for both systems, there are options for both students who are Luxembourgish, and then students who are uh, newly arrived students, for example.
Okay, okay. That's interesting. And that kind of links me to the next question, which is more in terms of the, let's say, a high level, again, overview of the different international schools that we have here in Luxembourg, versus, of course, commune schools. Everyone, based on whichever location that they live in Luxembourg, they are familiar that you have commune schools. My question to you is, what are the different options for expat parents who want their children to attend public schools in Luxembourg? So I include international schools also as a part of the public schools because these are the state
Yeah.
funded ones. So as you said, that yeah, Luxembourg provides free international school. So yeah, I have included those as a part of this, as a part of the Luxembourgish education system.
Yes, absolutely. Just quickly before I get into that, you mentioned something that was really important. So yeah, at the primary level, I didn't mention this. At the primary level, typically we place children in schools closest to their homes.
Yeah.
Um, at the secondary level, we also try our best to
Yes.
place the students. This is for newly arrived students at the secondary level. So newly arrived students, we try to place them in schools that are closest to their homes.
Yeah.
However, that's not always possible, depending on availabilities, depending on what class they been accepted in,
Yeah.
and if that school offers that class. But we try our best to do that. But sometimes children at the secondary level do have to commute a bit. At the primary level, we want to limit that because the children are younger and they're not mature enough most of the time to travel on their own. Um, for the international public schools, so yeah, just to kind of go through all of them in detail. We have this German Luxembourgish international school. There's only one.
Mm-hmm.
This is a school. Actually, it's in Schengen.
Yeah.
So if you guys know Luxembourg, it's an important it's a
Area.
historical place in terms of Europe, and
Exactly.
of course this is where the Schengen area comes from. And because Schengen is on the border with Luxembourg, Germany, and France, there's this school there, and it's again German and Luxembourgish school. In terms of languages, they have French and German.
Yeah.
Okay. We then have A levels. So the British school. So this is Michel Lucius.
Yeah.
So this is a completely English speaking school.
Yeah.
We then have European schools. I want to just give a caveat here because I get a lot of calls for this. Um, Again, these are European public schools because we do
Mhm.
also have two European private schools,
Yeah.
and these are you have to pay for those, and I think one of the requirements is that one of the parents has to work in one of the European
Institutions.
institutions. But we're not talking about those. We're talking about the European public ones.
Yeah.
Um, and we have six of those actually spread around the country. We have one in Esch-Diefeldange.
Yeah.
We have one in Mondorf,
Yeah.
Mondorf-les-Bains.
Yeah.
We have one in Mersch. We
Yeah.
have one in Junglinster. We have one in Clairvaux. And then we have a new school, Gaston Don, which just opened last year. And that one is in Sessange, so right in Luxembourg City.
Yeah. 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 My son
Uh,
goes to the Mont of Labor.
oh, okay. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, so this is one of the European schools. Um, yeah, and then we also have the IB, so the International Baccalaureate.
Yeah.
We have three schools that offer this program for the moment.
Hmm.
Um, it changes every year, so maybe I don't know, one school might decide not to do it for next year. But for the moment, we have LTC, so
Hmm.
it's the Lycée Technique du Centre here in Luxembourg City. They offer the IB. We have Lycée Matthias Adam
Hmm.
in Pétange. So they also offer the IB.
Okay.
And then we have Athénée Lycée. which is in Luxembourg City. They also offer the IB.
Okay. So that's really cool because many a times I mean, such information, although a lot is available on the public domain, but just having, like, say, a video, a visual and an audio mode of, let's say, a short summary can help a lot of Instagram-friendly parents to
Yeah,
find, to find this information and consume it. So, yeah, thank you so much again,
of course,
Dwayne, for
of
sharing
course.
this. So, my next question to you is more in terms of, now we have discussed, let's say, the different schools that are available under the public schools. We have also discussed a little bit about the education system, how are the different grades, how the children move from the primary to secondary, the different forms of secondary education system. We talked about the classical, general, and the preparatory route of education for the secondary students. Now, I'd like to, let's say, go a little bit a one layer, let's say, below,
Okay.
and would like to ask you in terms of how does the curriculum differ between Luxembourgish and an international school within the
Hmm.
public system? Because we discussed these two. Now
Yeah.
that we have these six European public schools,
Hmm.
so the and does the IBs also come as a part? So I'm considering the IBs also come under a part of international schools, right?
Yes, yes.
All the lists that you mentioned, including the
These are all
Schengen,
in, yeah.
Lucius, these are all international schools, and the commune schools are the ones which are, let's say, the proper, let's say, public one, which teach in German and in Luxembourg. Luxembourgish is the mode also of speaking as a language, and then in the secondary they switch to French.
Hmm.
Yeah. So yeah,
So
in terms of curriculum, how does the Luxembourgish and the international school system differ?
I don't want to go too much into detail because, as you guys saw, for the Luxembourgish system, it took up most of the time, and I can do that for each track actually for each system. So I think it would be easier if I do distinguish them in terms of the language requirements that are needed
Yeah.
to get into these schools.
Yeah.
For, let's say, the European schools, this system. Uh, One main difference, before I get to the languages, is that for primary they have 5 years. They don't have these cycles like we do in the Luxembourgish system, as I mentioned before. So
Yeah.
they have 5 years. So we call it P1, P2, P3, P4, P5.
Yeah.
And then they have 7 years at the secondary level. So actually, in this system, they have 1 year less
Mm-hmm.
than in the Luxembourgish school system. So they have 12 years, and then the Luxembourgish system has 13.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the main differences structurally.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of languages, they have three linguistic sections. So they have an English section, they have a German section, they have a French section.
Yeah.
At the primary level to enter, you need, I would say, at least one of those languages, mother tongue, so English, French, or German. And then they start learning the second language already in primary as well. At the secondary level, you need to, when to enter, let's say grade 7. So this is the first year of secondary. Sorry, I'm mixing this. See, it even happens to me.
S1.
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 So the first year of secondary, you need two languages to enter. You need
Okay.
one language, mother tongue, and the second language has to be at a good enough level. It doesn't need to be fluent, but already the child has to have a strong base in the second language.
It could be either
Um,
French or German.
French or German in that case,
Yeah.
exactly. And then as you get older, it gets more complicated. When you're, let's say, 15, so in S3, you need to have all three languages.
Ah, okay.
So this is something we get a lot actually from families. I don't know, a child that comes that's 16 and they just speak English. It's I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's nearly impossible getting into the European system at the age of 16 with just one language because
Yes.
at a certain age they already start having classes in the second and third language.
Yeah.
So at some point you won't even be able to follow the system, the classes, the curriculum.
Yeah.
So for example, and these are not just language classes. These are like actual classes that are required to continue.
Subject, it could be science, it could be humanities,
Yeah,
anything
yeah,
which are not
exactly.
in either German or French or any language. Yeah,
Exactly. So they really mix the three.
yeah,
And the goal in terms of languages is to get the child to speak all three at
fluently.
not necessarily fluent,
Hmm.
but let's say the first language has to be mother tongue. The second language has to be I think C1,
Yeah.
which is like advanced, and then the third language has to be like a B2, let's say,
Okay.
so upper intermediate.
Yeah.
And I think that's the requirement, that they need to have in order to graduate in terms of the languages. In the German Luxembourgish school, you need a strong level of French and a strong level of German.
Yeah.
So typically, I would say most of the families that we're in touch with, a lot of people speak English,
Mhm.
so we don't really hear much about this school because it's German and French.
Yeah.
But yeah, and actually, what's cool? Well, it's different. I don't know if it's cool, but it's different. Actually, in the end of this schooling, they get two diplomas.
Okay.
They get a German high school diploma, and they get the Luxembourg. It's the same thing, but yeah, they get both diplomas. For Misha Lucius,
Mhm.
the British school, so with the A levels, everything is in English.
Yeah.
So in order to enter that school, English needs to be mother tongue or really at a high level.
Hmm.
And I would say typically there we see students who come from English speaking countries.
Countries. Yeah.
So the US, India, the UK,
Okay.
Australia,
Ireland.
Ireland, etc. Yeah, there are students also who are not from English speaking countries who go there as well. But I would say most of their students are native English speakers.
Yeah.
Um, what else? Also in Michelusis, they have a Luxembourgish system as well at the primary. So they follow the local school, but you can also do the international program where everything is in English. And they have, if you guys are familiar with the A levels, the last 3 years are very particular. If you don't pass the exams, then you're out. You don't get to continue. Yeah, it's completely different system from ours. But yeah, that's that one in terms of languages. And then the IB.
Yes.
So again, we have three schools that offer the IB. One of them offers an English program, so that's Atene. That's the one in Luxembourg City.
Yeah.
So in order to enter that school, you need to have English
Yeah.
at a high level, so
Yeah.
almost mother tongue. And they usually test English and math to
Yeah.
enter. And that's up until I would say the age of 15. Starting from the third year, you need to have French as well. Because the goal of that school, in terms of the languages, is to get English and French at the same level by the time they graduate.
Okay.
So that means, in theory, if I'm a student there and I'm able to do a chemistry class in English, I should be able to do the same class in
French.
French. The other two schools that offer the IB, so LTC here in the city, and then Matthias Adam in the
Yeah.
south, they offer the program in French, so it's the reverse. So you can enter with French, and then you learn English. And then as we mentioned earlier, in the Luxembourg system with the languages, you have Luxembourgish, German, and French. However, one thing that I didn't mention, a lot of parents typically get worried about that. Um, we also have classes that are in French at the secondary level. Like you can do all of your schooling in French at the secondary level
Okay.
without Luxembourgish, without German.
The system is designed in such a way that the child does not feel underconfident.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, that's a really good point. We get calls like that a lot. I think I think I might have a question on this too, but it really ties in with what you were saying. A lot of parents typically fear the Luxembourgish system because they know it has Luxembourg, they know it has German, it
Yes.
has French. How's my child going to be able to do this? And it's fine. It's really
Yes.
it,
Yeah.
it sounds scary for an adult, but you'd be surprised, especially for the young children, how quickly they're able to learn these languages. And as you mentioned, there are so many support systems in place for them to learn the languages. And even in the international schools, that's something I didn't mention. I get these calls a lot as well.
Yeah.
The children have to study all of the languages
Yeah.
at some point. So, for example, even in Misha Lucius, there's a requirement to learn Luxembourgish, French, and German. they're not the main languages of instruction, but because these schools are here in Luxembourg, it's important that the children at least have some base in the language so that they can integrate in the country.
Right.
Even there, the children are going to have to learn the other languages.
I think that's the beauty of Luxembourg, like because I've recorded a couple of episodes now of this podcast, and I've been discussing with parents, and in fact, the last episode that I recorded was with a teacher who is in Michel. I had these interactions, and that's the common point that stands out here in Luxembourg is that being a multilingual country, when you see at this point in time, because of course as adults, as you also mentioned, that we feel that it is too overwhelming for a kid to
Mhm.
expose them to multiple languages, but the kids are fine by themselves. Like
Yeah.
again, to share my personal example, like after Hindi, which is our mother tongue in India, and then my family speaks that. The second language that my kid picked up was Luxembourgish and not English. So and I'm proud to say that my son speaks as good Luxembourgish as a native.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and I was really surprised to see that because at the age, because he started going to a commune creche
Uh, yeah,
when he was there. So, and at the age of 3 and a half, he was very well able to distinguish between that, okay, my parents cannot understand Luxembourgish, they do not speak Luxembourgish. So, the moment we used to drop him at the creche, he used to switch to Luxembourgish and,
fish food.
oh yeah. Oh yeah, and that was his. And the moment we used to go and pick him up in the evening or the afternoon, depending. So, and then he used to switch to Hindi. And there used to be times wherein, like with the commune teachers, if you were asking something that, okay, how was his day, what did he do, so on and so forth. So at times a few of the teachers were a little bit struggling because the common mode of language for us to interact was English. So
Yeah.
if we are finding short of vocabulary, the 3-year kid at that point in time was able to do the role of a translator, and I was simply amazed that how can a child do that. But it's just,
Yeah.
and I tell this to my friends as well who have moved recently or who are planning to share, or planning to send their kids to the schooling system. And I tell them that please expose them to multiple
Yeah.
languages
Yes.
because it is our mental block as adults and not the kids. So you have to give them a chance to let them integrate into the system,
Absolutely.
and you will be surprised to see how fast they pick up languages.
This is exactly, your son is the perfect example. Because no, really, it's really that, the children, they'll be just fine. They're gonna be just fine, especially if they come here very young.
Yes.
They'll be fine. There's no problem. They will pick up the languages. There are children. I'm not going to say it's always like that. I would say it's mostly like that. There are children who maybe they mix the languages,
Yeah.
in the beginning because their brains are still trying to
Still trying to figure out
distinguish,
which is it. Yeah.
right? But at some point it clicks and it works. They
Yes.
have all of them, and then it's fine.
Yeah.
Really, don't worry. Everything will be fine. Let the children be children. Their brains are like sponges, and yeah, they'll learn all of the languages with no problem.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm glad that we discussed and spent a little bit time more here in this discussion because, again, this would be a very important point for all the parents who are concerned about the different education, options here in terms of the schools that they choose for their kids. Connected to that, because we have covered a few of the questions and let's say doubts that the parents mostly ask you. My next question is similar, and let's say an add-on to that, that based on your interaction over the years, because you've been associated with the ministry for quite some time, so you have interacted with multiple parents in your role. So can you share the broader themes and concerns of expat parents when they are transitioning into the Luxembourgish education system?
Yeah, we touched on that. I think the main thing is the fear of the languages. Really, that's I think the number one question that comes up. And I really have to explain, everything that we just explained. That there are options there. Even for the children who are a bit older, as I mentioned at the secondary level. Let's say you come here with just Spanish. There's the welcoming class available where you're going to learn French,
Yeah.
and that way you can integrate and have French. So. Um, I think that's the main, that's the biggest one, the fear of all of the languages because it's so new, it's so different from other countries. Um, I think another question that comes up in terms of school would be like the recognition of the diplomas.
Yeah.
So all of these systems that we mentioned in the public, so the international ones, the different international ones in the Luxembourgish system, they all give access to university. Sometimes families are like, "Oh, is my child going to be able to go to university with this diploma if I go here?" And yes, so all of the diplomas will give access. Um, there was I think it's the Lisbon Convention.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Lisbon Convention on the recognition of diplomas. So this was in, I think, 1997,
Yeah.
where it was put into place. And actually, so this diploma, anyone who has signed this convention, um, let's say, I don't know, let's say Luxembourg and I'm making up something because I don't know all of the countries. Let's say India.
Yeah.
Uh, say India's on the list. These two have agreed to recognize, the diplomas from their country.
The students of respective countries. Yeah.
Exactly. There are still requirements in place. So let's say I have a high school diploma from Luxembourg, um, the Luxembourgish school system, and I want to go to university in Spain.
Mm-hmm.
The Spain is, I think, also one of the countries on the list. So yes, in theory, the Ministry of Education there would be able to recognize my uh, high school diploma. However, one of the requirements to enter university there would be probably that I need to speak Spanish.
Yeah.
So if I don't speak Spanish, then okay, you can have your diploma recognized, but you don't speak the language, so you're not going to be able to go to university.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there. But yeah, so that's another question that comes up a lot about whether or not the different systems give access to university in different countries, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, generally speaking, let's say the European one, the Luxembourgish one, um, they give, I would say, access to all of the universities in Europe
Mm-hmm.
directly. I
Yeah.
mean, just naturally. If the child wanted to go to university in the US, they can. They would just have to get a recognition of their diploma
Yeah.
and then apply to university and everything and see if they have all of the requirements to enter. The IB is international,
It's
so that
British
gets
by
access
nature.
pretty much all over the world. Michel Lucius, so their diploma actually, I would say, gives direct access to all of the English-speaking universities,
Yes.
just because it's an English-speaking
Yes.
school. If you want to go to university in France, okay, the diploma would be recognized. You just have to prove that you speak French, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so all of the diplomas are recognized. And then, of course, depending on where the child wants to go to university, then it gets a bit tricky. I know, for example, for the U.S., we signed the convention, but we didn't ratify it. So it's actually really interesting. We have sometimes students coming from the U.S. who want to go to university here in Luxembourg,
Yeah.
and their diplomas are not directly recognized at times. So maybe because they're missing languages, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something you guys can look at. We can share that link for that later. I believe it is the Lisbon Convention for the Recognition of Diplomas. I think that's the name, but
But yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah. That would be really helpful. In fact, I was about to ask you the same. Like, if there is a link available, we can probably share it in the episode description so that parents who are interested, whose kids are about to move to universities, can check that already.
Mhm. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's the advantage of, recording it, and once you are editing, you can have all those add-ons that you can share with the audience later.
Yeah.
So yeah, a live recording does not allow us such options. Audience
Yes.
would also
So,
understand. So yeah, that's the objective, that we bring to you information in a way which is helpful. So we gather that information from different sources, so that you do not have to look at multiple places.
mhm,
So, with that, we have discussed about integrating students in terms of the linguistic capabilities, Dwayne, here, that the support that the government is providing is phenomenal. What other support systems can you think of are in place to help expat children integrate into the Luxembourgish schools?
I think it kind of, in terms of integration, it kind of happens naturally, again, because we have so many people that are coming from so
Different
many different countries,
nationalities, yes.
different nationalities with different language backgrounds. It really just happens naturally. You
Yeah.
even have students who are, let's say, born here in Luxembourg. Let's take your son, for example. You
Yeah.
know, his family comes from India. He
Yeah.
was raised here, maybe born here as well. Born,
Born in India, but just he was 5 months when we moved here.
yeah.
As good as born here.
Almost born and raised in Luxembourg.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very
and
much.
you know, maybe his classmates, I don't know, maybe he has a lot of classmates who speak Portuguese. He
Yeah.
might even pick up the Portuguese language just
Yes.
because he's hanging out with a lot of Portuguese colleagues, you know.
Yeah.
So just because there are so many different nationalities, so many different backgrounds, and these children are all mixed in these different classes, whether it be in the international system or the Luxembourgish system. um, I wouldn't say integration is difficult
Yes.
um, uh, for students. Um, in terms of the cultural integration, we do have this department. We can share this later to the public, but it's called Script.
Yeah.
So SCRIPT. Script, and in French, it's the Service de Coordination de la Recherche et de l'Innovation Pédagogique et Technologique.
I will never be able to repeat it.
So it's the Department for Coordination of Pedagogical and Technological Research and Innovation.
Okay,
That's like
perfect.
the translation. But yeah, actually, they have a bunch of multidisciplinary projects,
Mhm.
let's say, that they come up with to kind of help integrate children culturally.
Yeah.
And so what they mean by culture is you know, music, art,
Yes.
um, uh, history.
Yeah.
So providing chances to do like school trips to visit, I don't know, a historical place in the country, so that all of the students can learn about this history. Um, Unfortunately, I don't have all of the information on this thing. It's
No
not in
worries.
the department, but again, we can share this
Link.
information
Uh,
later,
this
so that the families can take a look at this.
Yes, yes. So I think that was really, again, comprehensive overview, detail of, we have discussed the curriculums, we have discussed the schooling, the difference between the different schools, the cultural integration aspect, inclusive of the languages. Now I'd like to move more towards a very specific question that I have for you is there could be at times like there are children who have special needs.
Mhm.
So, how is the Luxembourgish education system adaptive for children with special needs? Like, have you encountered or come across any interaction with parents who have kids who need special attention?
Absolutely. Actually, I feel like it's on the rise too. In the past few years that I've been working in the ministry, from the beginning until now, I definitely think there's been an increase in terms of children who are newly arrived who have special needs, for example, that my department sees. So we have. I'm probably not going to go too much into detail on this because it's not our job. There's another
Yeah,
department for this as well.
yeah,
But it's the Commission Nationale de l'Inclusion. So it's a national committee or commission for inclusion or of inclusion,
yeah.
or for short CNI.
Mhm.
So this body is actually responsible for coming up with diagnostics for children with special needs.
Mhm.
For example, I don't know, let's say there's a child who might be presenting symptoms of autism.
Mhm.
So they would be sent to this commission with the family,
Yeah.
where there would be, you know, a bunch of tests that would be done at a medical level, I mean.
Yes.
And it's basically just to see, okay, what is the problem? What
Yeah.
is the special need that the child has? And this could range from, I mean, yeah, I said autism. It could be ADHD or hyperactivity. It could be children who have we say high potential in French. it's not the word in English at all.
Yeah.
But children who are really smart, let's say, who have high IQ level,
Mm-hmm.
this is also considered a special need. So you have yeah, a range of these special needs, and the CNI kind of is responsible for finding out what these needs are,
Yeah.
and then they kind of establish a program, specialized program for the student in the school.
Okay.
So there's a department in the school, CEPAS, it's called, and they receive the diagnostic from the CNI, and they kind of work with the teachers, on how do they deal with this special need in class. That could mean maybe having a second teacher there to help out. It could mean I don't know, giving I don't know, papers in a bigger format so the child can see them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe giving certain homework assignments, maybe in an easier way compared to
Mhm.
what's given in the regular class. Um, One thing I kind of like here in Luxembourg is that we, as the name mentioned, the Center, the Commission of National Inclusion, we really try to include
Yes.
all of the children who have special needs in the regular classes. We don't want them to feel like they're different.
Yes.
So we really do try to include them in the class if it's allowed.
Yeah.
If it, there could be times where we have a student who has, I'm mentioning autism because this one happens. I mean, I've been seeing it a lot,
Yeah.
where, the child might be screaming all the time. And maybe in this case, it's not possible to then put them in a regular class.
Yes. Yeah.
But if it's, let's say, a moderate version of autism, and the child can be incorporated in the regular class, we do that. We do also have, I believe there are nine, don't quote me on it, but I think there are nine specialized centers
Okay.
that, they all have different uh, specialties. So,
Yes.
like, let's say one could be autism. And so
Yes.
the children who might not be able to integrate one of these regular classes would then be taken care of in one of these centers. So there's an option for both, actually. But in general, we do try to incorporate the children in the regular classes so that they can feel welcome, and that also exposes the children who don't have special needs to something that's different, and
Yes.
to learn to
Absolutely.
accept that difference and respect it as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I really like that we do that here.
Yes, and that's great because then, I mean, having done that, like keeping all the children under the same roof in the same class is actually truly inclusivity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Otherwise, I mean, uh, even providing, let's say, special care to the kids, but if imagine a situation wherein you're treating the kids differently, or there is a separate class going on for them, like then even let's say kids who do not require any special attention, they'll never be able to respect the kids
yeah.
who need special needs, and vice versa, the kids with special needs will always feel that they lack something.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. No, that's exactly what I mean.
Yeah.
Another point to add there, for families that are coming from abroad, who already know in advance that they have a child who has special needs, it's important to bring recent medical records.
Yeah.
And also it would be important to start contacting the CNI even before you arrive,
Okay.
just to get the procedure going, because it can take some time depending on the special need, depending on how many cases they have at once. Not a huge administration, so it can take some time before the child is able to be placed in the school with a specialized program. So I advise families to do that in advance if they can, and then again make sure you have all of the medical records. And another reason why we do the diagnostic testing with the CNI. Um, we've seen it a lot actually. And this is not to knock any country specifically, but like let's say a child is coming from country X, and the doctor in country X said the child hyperactivity or something. I don't know. And then the child comes to Luxembourg. We do this diagnostic test with them, and then we find out, oh, actually, the child isn't focused because they need glasses,
Yeah.
you know, and then that the child actually isn't a child that has, hyperactivity, but maybe they just needed glasses and they couldn't
Yeah.
see before. And so this is why we do kind of a double check. And there
Yeah.
are some countries where the testing is very similar. So I know, like Germany, for example, they're very the diagnostic testing is very similar to Luxembourg's. So typically, I know families that come from there who have already, had a specialized diagnostic
Diagnosis.
diagnosis from Germany. When they come here to Luxembourg, it's usually accepted quickly. They don't need to do another test.
Yeah. But that makes a lot of sense because even like it could happen from country to country. The diagnosis can vary, not to challenge
Yeah,
any doctors
right,
fees
right,
here,
right.
but of course, just as a system, it's always good to cross check and validate and see how it matches to the new country's rules and regulations.
Right, right, correct, correct.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, perfect. So, with that, I think we are coming to the conclusive part of this episode. I am thoroughly enjoying this conversation with you, Dwayne, and
Same.
it's been very enlightening for me personally as well because I've learned a lot from you in the last few minutes of conversations that we have had. And definitely, I mean, I have to accept it publicly, but I have to rely a little less on my husband for the education system knowledge. I can also now, proudly boast that, okay, I am a little bit more aware of the Luxembourgish education system. So, because I mentioned of my husband here, that kind of, let's say, again, it forms a chain and a connecting link to my next question, which is what is the role of parents that they play in their children's education within the Luxembourgish education system? How would you like to frame it?
Yeah, I think I don't want to say it's the same everywhere.
Yeah.
I would hope it's the same everywhere, but parents, you guys play the most important role, I would say, actually. You can have a child that's in school, and maybe doing well in school, but I think the first education comes from home. So not even just in terms of, let's say different subjects, so math, science, or whatever, but also how to behave in class, for example, how to treat others. Let's say in orientation, I'll give you an example. I mentioned earlier at the beginning of talk in cycle 4.2, for example, after these set of exams, there's an orientation that's made. And so the teachers, let's say, would tell the families, okay, your child, we're going to put him in the general section.
Yes.
Okay. The parents can challenge that. They don't have to say, okay, yeah, well, okay, he will just do general. If they
Yeah.
really believe that their child can handle, let's say, the classical route or whatever, they can challenge it. And at the end, the teacher and the parent, they have to come to an agreement together on, this orientation. It's not one-sided. So the parents really have a strong role in terms of the education of their children in school. And again, I think that it plays a role in all of the schools here in Luxembourg, whether it be the public sector or the
Right.
international sector. And I hope it's the same again in the rest of the world. I honestly think it's sad to see sometimes parents who kind of just let the school take over
Yeah.
in terms of the education of their child. It shouldn't be like that. It should
Yeah.
be at least 50-50, you know?
Yes. Yes.
Um, and then also here in Luxembourg, we have so many resources. So there's almost kind of no excuse.
Yeah.
For example, my department, for example, I said for example twice, sorry, it's getting late. Yeah, so in my department, we have this mediation service, an intercultural mediation service.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a fancy word for an interpreter. Yeah, culturally, this person kind of bridges the gap between the two cultures. So let's say there's a student parent meeting at school, and let's say you don't speak French, English, German, or Luxembourgish, and there's no means of communication. The parent can, or the school can contact our department and request an intercultural mediator who can come to the school, help
Facilitate the interaction with.
facilitate the interaction between the two parties. And again, it's not just language, but even culturally, there are so many cultural differences, right? There was a parent-teacher meeting, and a family from country X came. There was a mediator that was there as well. The teacher had his legs crossed, and the soles of his feet were pointed towards the father. And the father just started going crazy, and he was upset, and he didn't know what, no one knew what was going on.
Yeah.
And the intercultural mediator was, the person to, explain on both sides what was going on. So
Yeah.
actually, in the father's country, in his culture, when you point the bottom of your foot to someone, it means they're below you, they're beneath you, like
Oh,
under your shoe.
yeah, yeah.
And so he explained that to the
Was
teacher.
it came out as disrespectful?
Yes, but the teacher, of course, had no idea
Of
that
course.
was a thing. So this intercultural mediator was able to explain that to the teacher, and then also on the other side was able to explain to the father, "Hey, I know in our country it's like this, but here in Luxembourg we don't have this culture. The teacher didn't mean to offend you or whatever."
Yeah.
So so again, just to jump back, we have so many resources available to include families in terms of the education of their children.
Yeah.
I would get it. Maybe let's say you don't speak the language at all, and there was no one there to help translate, and you kind of just accepted everything that the school said. Okay, it's a little bit different, but here we have so many resources available. For me, there's no excuse. I'm a little harsh there.
Absolutely.
There's no excuse.
No, and in fact, you made a very good point when in the beginning of this answer, when you said that the role of parents can never be, or the role of school can never be one-sided. So
Mhm.
let's say it has to be a 50-50,
Yeah.
where the parents just cannot let everything dependent on the education system to take care of their own kids' education.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
Because like I firmly believe, and in the very beginning I said that it's the parents who know their kids very well. They know their kids inside out. They know their capabilities. They know what they're good at, what they are not good at, what they need to improve upon. They understand, even if they are not following their education very closely, but they are very well familiar with the basic characteristics and the basic nature of the kids. So I think parents do play a very critical role, no matter in whichever education system, in whichever country you are.
Yeah.
But it's a never-ending, let's say, responsibility as a parent that you have.
Yeah, sorry, and here in Luxembourg, I would even encourage families, because this is something we hear a lot too. Oh, I don't know how I'm going to help my child with homework because I don't speak German or French.
Yeah,
Sometimes that means you might have to take a German class or a French class if that means,
yeah,
that's going to be able to, a way for you to help your child with German homework, or even in the beginning. I mean, once they get older, they'll be able to do everything on their own. But at the primary level, I think that's really important to at least have the basics of the languages, so that way you can, help the child a bit, and also show the child, okay, look, I'm also new. We came at the same time, and I also have to do
yeah,
this with you. We're in this together.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
so yeah, and
No, it's a great way, in fact, even to bond for parents with the kids as well.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Imagine like for especially because by the time secondary children are by themselves, they're able to do their homework by themselves. In
Right.
primary, they might still need a little bit of hand holding and support from the parents that they are
Hmm.
struggling with. Okay, how do I deal with this or how do I do that? Then yeah, even if that means that as parents we have to learn languages, at least the basic. Not saying that
Yeah,
become
you need
expert
to
in
be
that.
fluent. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but even if you are able to do, let's say, basic A1, A1.2,
Right,
then
right,
I think we'll be able to, let's say, help our kids a little bit in their school related stuff and homeworks.
right. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And with that, I think my last two questions for you, and then we'll be done for sure, I promise.
No worries.
So, my second last question to you, Dwayne, is how does the Luxembourgish education system prepare the kids for workforce?
So in the Luxembourgish system, under this vocational training, I would definitely say, at least for the first two, so the professional certificate and the professional diploma, this is a program that prepares them immediately for work.
Yeah.
Um, so, they're doing this internship program for 3 years where they're learning a trade, for example.
Yeah.
And then usually after the program is finished, if they, worked well during that time, the person that they were, interning with typically hires them. So immediately after they finish, they have a job. So um, I would say, yeah, and for that track, that immediately prepares them for work.
Yeah.
For the other systems, typically, of course, there are children who get their high school diploma and decide to go to work after. But I would say, generally speaking, a lot of the students do want to continue on with their education and go to university. And what something that's interesting here, and what was interesting for me because I'm from the US,
Yeah.
um, is that they have the whether it's in the classical or the general track, they have this 3 or 4 years of specialized subject that they have to study.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have that in my country, for example. It's kind of more liberal artsy. So
Yes. Yes.
you kind of just study everything. And then once you get to university, that's when you kind of decide what you want to do.
Specialized.
It works in both ways. It's good if you're sure,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes.
So like if you know at the age of 15 that you're gonna be an engineer, I don't know, and that's what you're gonna do, it's great. But then knowing children and knowing how I was when I was younger, your the things you want to do changes all the time. So you could, specialize, let's say, in science and then get to university and decide you don't want to do that. Um, so I think there are positives and negatives
Yes.
in terms of preparing for the university. I think the students are capable of doing any subject. That's not the
Right.
problem. But just the fact that they have to choose a specialty at such a young age, um, not knowing whether or not when they get to university, if
Yes.
that's going to be the thing that they want to
What
do.
they end up doing the rest of their lives, let's say,
Yeah.
work-wise.
But the education that they have in the system, I would say, does allow them and gives them the discipline at least to study whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and then obviously, if they let's say you studied science as your specialty, and you get to university and you do science, I think it would be a lot easier for you than someone, let's say, that came from the U.S.
Yeah.
Who studied a bit of everything because you have more knowledge of the different sciences. So pluses and minuses there.
Yeah, I think which is fair. I think it happens like in all the fields, in all the areas, like there are pros and cons. So with this also we have pros and cons. And
Mhm.
I'm sure by that time, by secondary, even the kids are, let's say, a little bit smart enough to understand. They are wise to make their choices carefully. Of
Yeah,
course, with the help of the parents, with the help of the teachers and the school staff, the children are equipped and empowered to take that decision for themselves with the support of all these support people and the ecosystem around them.
right, right. Oh, another thing that's really cool, I didn't mention this in the technician's diploma in the vocational training. So that's
Mhm.
the third and highest one
Yeah,
of the vocational training. Um, the students, once they get their diploma,
yeah.
and they do that extra year, they can either go to university or they can open their own business.
Ah,
So that also prepares them for the workforce. They have the requirements because not everyone like me, I cannot just open any
yeah, yeah,
business
yeah,
have the requirements. I can't open a restaurant
yeah,
and not know how a restaurant works and have the work experience to work and to open a restaurant because it's dangerous.
yeah,
I could actually hurt someone or get them sick if I'm not following the rules of the regulations that are in place
yeah,
for restaurants. So these students, they're allowed to open their own businesses, and I
business.
think it's even allowed the DAP, the second of the three, the professional diploma. They
Okay.
can also open their own business, I believe, as well.
This is really cool, yeah, because not everyone wants to work in like a job kind of an environment. And
Yeah.
there are people who want to have their own setup and their own business. So, really good that you remembered this to share with us. And my last question to you, Dwayne, is what if I were to ask you one advice to give to parents and one advice to give to children who are moving to Luxembourg, what would that be?
Um, let's
You can take
see.
your time.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
no rush here.
so yeah, I would for parents, I think it's important to on the Ministry of Education's website, there's a lot of information, there are a lot of resources. I think before moving, it's really important to already take a look at that. I think that it's it's kind of biased because I know the information, but I think it's pretty, it's pretty accessible.
Yes.
I think most people shouldn't have any problems reading it. It's usually easy reads. There's nothing that's too
Yeah.
um,
Complex.
descriptive or confusing. So I advise parents to already take a look at that. And then also, again, my department, we're responsible for you guys. So the parents who just arrived to the country who have no idea how everything works in terms of the schooling. And so you can always contact us. I'll leave my contact information with Ruchi. So
Thank you so much.
you
That
guys
would
can,
be of great help.
of course, if families have any specific questions, they have any doubts about anything, you can always contact our department to get more information before you come. And I want to be specific here before you come because sometimes we get families who come, they have maybe no idea about how the system works, and then there's this kind of harsh reality for them when they realize, ooh, like depending on the age of the child, let's say the child is 17, I don't know,
Yes.
and they realize, ooh, university is not going to be possible in Luxembourg for my child.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's really important to research that information before you decide to move
yeah.
if you have a child that needs to, still go to school. And one of the main examples of that is a student who, let's say, in their country of origin is in the last year. I get that a lot. Students who are in their last year in their country of origin. I advise families to let the child finish finish that year in their home country, get their diploma.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it's in a country that is, part of this Lisbon
Lisbon
Convention,
Convention.
because that's another thing. If they're not, then
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
tricky. But yeah, let them finish the schooling in their home country if it's possible. I know sometimes it's not. If it is possible, let them finish. And then afterward, it will be a lot easier for them when they want to apply for university.
Yeah.
But yes, definitely do your research before. And then if you're not able to do it on your own, contact us and we're there to help. And we get calls from families sometimes. Some parents are really on it and they want to make sure that there are possibilities for their children before. But one thing I would advise both families and the children, sorry, the parents and the children, is to maybe even start learning a little bit of the languages.
Yeah.
So depending on, yeah, of course, what system you want to enter in the public, so whether it's the European system or the British system or the Luxembourgish system, etc., already to start making sure that the child has a base in one of these languages. And of course, again, as we mentioned earlier, it depends on what, what their age is and what class they're trying to enter. That
Yes.
could mean maybe dabbling in two languages.
Yeah.
Um, if there's a possibility to get private classes or tutoring or I don't know, Duolingo even
Yes,
or
yes. In
YouTube
fact,
or
I was about to say the same. There are many language apps these days that you can install and start, in fact, doing it at
yeah.
your own pace if you already know that you're moving to a different country. And you can start picking up the languages at least from the very basic at your side, which is bare minimum.
Absolutely, and I feel like most families are moving typically at the end of a school year or like over the summer, and even a couple of months
Yeah.
of just getting used to the different sounds of the languages is going to be super helpful for the children.
Yeah.
And then yeah, specifically for the children who are in who don't have any of the languages here in Luxembourg, so English, French, German, or Luxembourgish for the welcoming classes that they would have to do. I always tell these children, this is for the secondary level, that it's really important to try to interact with people who are not from the same culture as you. And
Hmm.
so what I mean is, I'm going to
Yes.
take an example. We have a large Portuguese community here in Luxembourg.
Yeah.
And so let's say we have families coming from Portugal or Brazil or Angola or wherever, Cape Verde. They get put in these welcoming classes, and because there are so many students who speak Portuguese, what
Yes.
happens is they speak Portuguese together and they don't really speak French.
Yes.
And so they actually don't get the
Continue
chance
to
to
speak in
integrate.
their own native language and
Right, right. And what the good thing about this class is that because there are so many people from so many different backgrounds coming, and one of your classmates could be from China, let's say.
yes.
His or her main language is Chinese, your main language is Portuguese. So the one language that's going to join you guys would then be French.
Yeah.
So I advise children. It's good to have something to lean on that you're familiar with. So I don't want to say don't hang out with Portuguese people or don't hang out with
Yeah.
Indians or don't. No, that's not what I want to say. But really, just try to mingle with all of the students so that you can really practice the language.
Yeah, yeah. I think those are really useful practical advices that you gave here, both to parents as well as to children, because I think both are doable. Is there's
Mhm,
no extra, I would say, a lot of extra effort would go if they try to implement it from their side, from parents also. I mean, it makes a
mhm.
lot of sense to do a little bit of homework in advance to know where you're going, what kind of education system is there, and do a little bit of research. If they're not finding anything online, of course, there's a lot of information available on the Ministry of Education website as well.
Yeah,
And if they struggle, they can always reach out to you. And for children as well, it's a very practical advice that, okay, you can learn languages. You can start beginning, at least getting yourself familiar with the different tonalities and the sounds
hmm,
of the language, and mix with children once you move here, of course, then try and interact with children of different cultures as well, so that at least the language that you're trying to learn becomes your common language of interaction rather than your
exactly,
native language.
exactly. And the language, and that's another thing too. I just quickly want to add. I know we have to close the language. So let's say French. And I'm again speaking to the children who are age 12 and up. So for the
Yeah.
secondary level, they enter the welcoming class. Let's say they start learning French. They learn it literally within 1 year. They should have French at a really good level. And again, it's because the class is mixed. They're going to be using it in class. They're in a French speaking country. So in their day to day, they're also going to be able to practice the language. And if they can really just, yeah, as you mentioned, and I mentioned earlier, if they can really try to speak the language as much as possible, they will get it because they're young as well and their brains are still like sponges too. Maybe not as much as the primary school students,
Yes.
but within 1 year, they should give themselves that goal to, be able to speak and understand the language. Um, and for adults, this is something I didn't mention in terms of advice for learning the languages. And again, I mentioned languages a lot because, again, there are so many languages. And even for, yeah, for work, whether it be for work, whether it be for going to the grocery store, whether it be for helping your child with homework,
Yes.
the languages are really important. So for adults, we do also have options. So let's say you're an adult that is here in Luxembourg and let's say you don't have a job yet or you're looking for a profession or whatever, there are programs in place where you can get, let's say, this DAP, so the professional diploma. So you can also do this program. There's the Service de la Formation des Adultes, so it's the department for adult training.
Mm-hmm.
They also offer free classes in languages
Okay.
and also in different, yeah, trainings. Um, we also have the INL,
Yes.
which is the Institut National des Langues, so the Institute for National Languages. And I think it's about 200 euros per semester. There are 2 semesters, and you have what between 2 to 3 days a week, 2 hours or something like that per class. That could be also a good way to start learning the language. Also, depending on where you live here in Luxembourg, your city hall might also offer free
Happens.
classes for newly arrived residents. So yeah, there are so many resources, guys. So
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, again, this is all information you can get on the ministry's website.
Definitely, definitely. I think the entire conversation has been really, really insightful for me personally, Dwayne. I'd like to reiterate that. And I hope that other fellow parents as well, and maybe few students or children who are watching this, listening to this, also gain value out of it, and they find it useful from the point of view it helped them solving some doubts of the Luxembourgish education system, because that was the objective of bringing this episode out to you guys and discussing with Dwayne and bringing him to the show. Really thankful to you, Dwayne, again for being a part of this show. And I hope that with this endeavor, even I was able to contribute a little bit to the Ministry of Education in terms of bringing some awareness. So feel free, as I said earlier, that feel free to use this piece of content. I'll of course be sharing with you. And only after the due approval from the ministry, I would post it and publish it online. And I'll be mentioning the relevant links that we discussed throughout these episodes. So I'll be putting all those links in the description so that if you missed out anything, if you'd like to check quickly something, you guys can go check, read more, and read more about it. Or if you want to contact Dwayne and the ministry, Dwayne has also mentioned that he'd be willing to share his contact details for the same. So I'd be linking that also in the description. So yeah, thank you once again, Dwayne.
Thank
Really thank
you.
you.
Thank you
And
so much for having me. And I'm so glad that we were able to do this again, as you mentioned. This is really helpful for us as well in the ministry because you're already giving, some providing some basic information for families before even, arriving to our
yes.
department. So thank you for having me. And then, yeah, hopefully we can do this again.
Yeah, yeah, I would love to. I'd love to. Maybe some other episode with some other topic. We can do that again. And
Uh,
bye to all our audience and listeners. We'll be back with another episode next week. Stay tuned for more updates.